The invasion no one remembered. No one remembers the invasion. That was the strangest part. There were no monuments, no history lessons, no global remembrance days. No old veterans telling stories on television. No documentaries showing burning skies or cities under attack. According to every official record, Earth had never been invaded at all. And yet, something was wrong. It was not a feeling that came all at once. It was slow, like a whisper that repeated itself quietly in the back of the mind. People would pause during normal moments, washing dishes, crossing the street, staring at the night sky, and feel a sudden sense of loss. A deep, aching sense that something terrible had happened, and that everyone had forgotten it. Evan Mercer felt it more than most. He was an archivist, a man who spent his life preserving records that others ignored. Old newspapers, damaged hard drives, forgotten audio tapes, and handwritten journals that no one wanted anymore. His job was simple: store the past so it would not disappear. Ironically, the past was disappearing anyway. It started with small inconsistencies. Evan noticed dates that no longer lined up. News articles that referenced events with no clear origin. Scientific reports that mentioned discoveries without explaining how they were made. Entire gaps in digital archives, as if someone had taken a careful knife and sliced sections of history cleanly out. At first, he blamed data corruption. But corruption did not explain the patterns. Every missing piece pointed to the same period, a 6-month stretch 10 years earlier. According to official timelines, nothing remarkable happened during that time. No wars. No disasters. No breakthroughs. Yet millions of files from those months were either damaged, rewritten, or completely gone. Evan began to dig deeper. One night, while restoring an old emergency broadcast recording, he heard something that made his hands freeze over the keyboard. A voice, distorted but urgent, spoke through static. "This is not a drill. They are not human. If you can hear this, do not trust." The recording cut off. Evan replayed it again and again. There was no record of any emergency matching that message. No explanation for who they were. No follow-up broadcast. It was as if the warning had been erased from reality itself. That night, Evan dreamed of the sky. In his dream, it was filled with shapes, massive, slow-moving shadows blocking out the stars. He heard alarms, screaming, and a deep vibrating hum that shook the ground. He woke up drenched in sweat, his heart racing, his ears ringing with a sound that faded only after several minutes. The next morning, Evan noticed something else. A scar on his left forearm. It was thin, pale, and perfectly straight. He had no memory of how he got it. Medical records showed it had always been there. But Evan knew that wasn't true. Across the world, others were waking up with similar realizations. A schoolteacher in Brazil found lesson plans she did not remember writing, describing evacuation drills that were never practiced. A radio operator in Norway discovered a logbook filled with transmissions from unknown sources written in his own handwriting. A child in Japan began drawing the same image over and over, towering figures standing silently in the streets while humans walked past them, unaware. No one connected these events. Not yet. The first public sign that something was wrong came from the sky. Astronomers reported unexplained distortions in deep space background radiation. The patterns were old, extremely old, yet they carried signatures of artificial design. When scientists attempted to trace the source, they found something impossible. The signals originated from Earth's orbit. As if something had been there before, government agencies quietly shut down the research. The explanation given to the public was equipment error. Careers were ended. Funding vanished. But the feeling did not go away. Evan followed the trail to a decommissioned data center scheduled for demolition. The building was officially empty, but his access credentials still worked, another inconsistency that should not have existed. Deep inside the facility, he found a server that was never listed in any inventory. It was still powered on. When Evan accessed the files, his blood ran cold. The folder was labeled, Contingency Memory Seed. Inside were fragmented videos, personal logs, and surveillance footage. Cities under blackened skies. Military units firing at shapes that did not bleed. People collapsing, screaming, then standing up again with empty expressions. And towering above everything else were the invaders. They did not arrive in ships. They arrived by unfolding. Reality itself seemed to peel open, revealing vast structures that did not obey geometry. The beings that emerged were tall, thin, and motionless. They did not attack. They did not speak. They watched. The logs explained what no living person remembered. The invasion was not a war. It was an overwrite. The beings, referred to only as the custodians, did not conquer Earth by force. They altered human perception, memory, time awareness. Entire experiences were removed, sealed away behind mental barriers placed inside every human mind. Why? Because humanity had noticed them. Long before the invasion, humans had detected something watching from beyond space. The custodians responded not with destruction, but correction. They erased the moment humanity became aware. But something went wrong. The memory wipe was not perfect. Fragments leaked through in dreams, art, anxiety, and unexplained fear. Some minds resisted more than others. Archivists, children, those who lived close to death. Evan watched the final video in the folder. A woman stared into the camera, her eyes red and hollow. "If you're seeing this," she said, "then we failed to forget completely. They will come back, not to invade, but to finish the edit." The video ended. Behind Evan, the server room lights flickered. And somewhere deep within his mind, a door quietly began to open. Evan did not leave the data center right away. He sat in the cold glow of the server lights, staring at the last frozen frame of the woman's face on the screen. Her expression was not fear. It was exhaustion, the look of someone who had fought something impossible and lost in a way that could never be explained. The words echoed in his head. Finish the edit. If the invasion had truly happened, and if the custodians had erased humanity's memory of it, then forgetting was not an accident. It was a condition of survival. Or worse, a condition of control. Evan copied everything he could onto an encrypted drive. As he worked, his head began to ache. Not a normal headache, but a deep pressure, as if something inside his skull was tightening. Images flickered at the edges of his vision. A street filled with abandoned cars. A child crying beneath a sky that looked wrong. A sound like metal bending through water. He dropped to one knee, gasping. The moment passed, leaving him shaken. The files were doing something to him. Or maybe they were reminding him of something he had already lived through. When Evan finally stepped outside, the city looked normal. People hurried to work. Traffic flowed. Screens advertised products and smiling faces. But now he noticed the pauses. A woman stopped mid-step, her eyes unfocused for half a second before continuing. A man stared at his phone, frowning as if something he had just read no longer made sense. A child pointed at the sky, only to be gently pulled along by his parent, the gesture dismissed without thought. The cracks were everywhere. Evan went home and locked his door. He didn't turn on the lights. Instead, he connected the drive to his personal system and began organizing the fragments. The logs described something called the Quiet Protocol. It had been humanity's last defense. When governments realized they could not fight the custodians, they attempted something desperate. Instead of resisting physically, they tried to hide awareness itself. A global neurological signal was deployed, one that suppressed memory formation related to the custodians and anything associated with them. Humans would see the invasion, then forget it. Every day. The invasion lasted 6 months. Every morning, people woke up believing nothing was wrong. Every night, cities were watched, studied, and altered. Infrastructure was rebuilt to suit unknown needs. Entire populations were moved and never realized they had been relocated. The custodians did not destroy humanity. They redesigned it. Evan found a file marked Anomalous Minds. It listed people whose brains did not fully respond to the Quiet Protocol. Artists. Insomniacs. Those with near-death experiences. Children under 7. Individuals with neurological differences. And archivists. His name was on the list. According to the file, Evan Mercer had been present at Observation Zone 14, a place that no longer existed on any map. He had been a recorder, someone tasked with documenting the invasion in ways that could survive memory suppression. He leaned back, breathing hard. "I was there," he whispered. The realization hit him like a wave. The fear he had carried his entire adult life without understanding it. The reason the night sky made his chest tighten. The reason silence sometimes felt threatening. Across the city, others were reaching the same conclusion. Mara Klein, a sound engineer, woke screaming from a dream where alarms never stopped ringing. She remembered voices speaking through radio static, voices that spoke directly into her thoughts. She remembered being told to forget. Dr. Hassan Rahman, a neurologist, found scans in his private research archive showing identical patterns across millions of brains worldwide. Structures that did not exist in any medical textbook. Structures that had appeared suddenly 10 years ago. Children began asking questions their parents could not answer. Why does the sky feel heavy? Why do I miss a place I've never been? Why do I remember standing very still while something watched me? Social media filled with vague unease. Posts disappeared minutes after being uploaded. Videos glitched. Accounts were deleted without explanation. Something was actively suppressing the truth. That night, Evan received a message from an unknown sender. You remember too much. Before he could respond, another message followed. Meet US before they notice. Coordinates appeared on his screen. Evan hesitated only briefly. He packed his drive, pulled on his coat, and stepped back into the city, into a world that had been invaded, rewritten, and carefully taught to forget. As he walked, the streetlights flickered in perfect unison. High above, unseen by human eyes, something vast shifted its attention. The custodians were still watching. And somewhere within the human mind, the quiet protocol was beginning to fail. The coordinates led Evan beneath the city, not into sewers or abandoned tunnels, but into a place that officially did not exist. The entrance was hidden behind a locked service door in an underground transit station that had been closed for structural upgrades for over a decade. Evan shouldn't have been able to enter. Yet the door opened the moment he touched it. Inside, the air felt different, thicker, heavier, as if sound itself moved more slowly. Long corridors stretched into darkness, lined with equipment that looked both human-made and unfamiliar. Screens flickered with data streams that made Evan's eyes ache if he stared too long. He was not alone. A dozen people stood in the central chamber. Some were young, others old. A few looked exhausted beyond their years. None of them seemed surprised to see him. Mara Klein stepped forward. I was hoping you'd come, she said. Evan recognized her instantly, though he had never met her before. Recognition bloomed without memory, an echo from the forgotten months. You remember, he said. Mara nodded. Enough. She introduced the group as the Awake. They were the ones who never fully forgot. The quiet protocol dulled their memories, blurred them, buried them under layers of confusion, but it never erased them completely. Over the years, they had found each other through shared dreams, recurring symbols, and the feeling that the world was lying. They met in secret, spoke in metaphors, left messages disguised as fiction, art, and noise. Because direct truth triggered suppression. Dr. Hassan Rahman was there too. He explained that the human brain had been permanently altered during the invasion. A new mental reflex had been installed, one that automatically rejected certain thoughts before they reached conscious awareness. It's not just memory loss, Hassan said. It's active defense. Your mind protects itself by refusing to see. Evan asked the question none of them wanted to answer. Are the custodians still here? No one responded immediately. Finally, a woman in the back spoke. Her name was Lena. She had been a city planner before the invasion. They never left, she said. She activated a display. Maps of the world appeared, layered with invisible structures, zones of influence that overlapped major cities, oceans, and remote regions. These were observation zones. During the invasion, Earth had been divided into these zones. Each was monitored continuously. Changes were made slowly, subtly. Human behavior was nudged, not forced. The custodians did not rule openly. They curated. Evan learned that Observation Zone 14, the place he had been assigned to, was once a city-sized area where something had gone wrong. Humans there had begun to remember faster than expected. The quiet protocol weakened. The custodians responded. Zone 14 was erased. Not destroyed. Removed. Its people were relocated, their surroundings rewritten, their pasts reassigned. The physical space itself no longer existed in any meaningful way. You watched it happen, Mara told Evan softly. He shook his head. I don't remember that. But your body does, she said. That night, the Awake shared what they had recovered. Recordings of silent figures standing at the edges of battlefields that never made the news. Blueprints for buildings that existed only after the invasion. Linguistic shifts in global speech patterns that aligned too perfectly to be natural. And then there was the signal. A low-frequency hum detected worldwide, buried beneath all human-made noise. It pulsed at intervals matching the custodians' monitoring cycles. They are synchronizing, Hassan said. Preparing for something. Evan felt the pressure in his head again. Images forced their way through. A massive shape hovering over a city. People standing still, eyes unfocused. A command that was not spoken but felt. Stay unaware. Evan staggered. Mara grabbed his arm. They're reacting to you. To all of us. The awake had begun to exceed tolerance levels. Too many fragments were aligning. Too many minds were pushing against the barriers. The custodians had a solution for that. As if summoned, alarms began to sound, not loud, but wrong. They vibrated through bone and thought rather than air. Lights dimmed. On every screen, a single symbol appeared. Not a language. Not a shape. A concept. Compliance. One by one, members of the awake froze. Their faces went blank. Their eyes lost focus. Mara fought it, trembling. Evan, they're reapplying the edit. Evan felt something inside him snap. No, he said. For the first time in 10 years, Evan Mercer remembered clearly. The invasion. The Watchers. The choice humanity had made. And the lie they were living. The symbol on the screens shattered. Somewhere far above the city, something noticed. When the symbol shattered, the room fell silent. Not peaceful silence, an absence so complete it felt unnatural. The alarm stopped mid-vibration. The screens went dark. Even the low hum beneath the city faded, as if the world itself had paused to listen. Evan stood at the center of it, breathing hard. Mara collapsed to her knees, clutching her head. One by one, the others began to move again, confusion written across their faces. What just happened? Someone whispered. Evan knew the answer before the memories finished assembling. They didn't expect resistance, he said. Not like this. Dr. Hassan stared at Evan, his eyes wide. You broke through a full compliance trigger. That shouldn't be possible. It wasn't, Evan replied. Not before. The memories came in waves now, clear, sharp, undeniable. 10 years ago, when the custodians revealed themselves fully, humanity had not panicked the way the invaders expected. There were riots, yes, and chaos. But there were also negotiations. The custodians were not mindless conquerors. They were caretakers of a kind, an ancient intelligence tasked with monitoring developing civilizations. Their purpose was simple: prevent species from expanding beyond their psychological limits. Humanity, they concluded, was dangerous. Not because of weapons, but because of curiosity. Humans asked questions that destabilized systems. They imagined futures that should not exist yet. They noticed Watchers. So the custodians initiated the invasion to evaluate whether humanity could be safely allowed to continue. And humanity failed. The quiet protocol was not imposed immediately. It was offered. The bargain was clear. Forget the custodians. Forget the invasion. Forget the truth beyond your sky. In return, Earth would be allowed to exist undisturbed. No extermination. No enslavement. Just ignorance. World leaders agreed. The alternative was erasure. Evan remembered standing in a room filled with representatives from every nation. He remembered the custodian presence, not a physical form, but a pressure that bent thought. You may live, the custodians conveyed, if you choose not to know. Humanity chose survival. Not everyone agreed. The awake had been the minority who believed that forgetting was worse than extinction. They became archivists, engineers, artists, and scientists tasked with hiding truth in places the protocol might miss. But the custodians accounted for most of them. Evan remembered Observation Zone 14. He remembered the moment a city realized it was being forgotten. And he remembered screaming as the custodians corrected it. Back in the underground chamber, the consequences of remembering became clear. The low hum returned, stronger than before. Hassan checked his instruments. They are escalating. This isn't maintenance anymore. Mara looked at Evan. They are responding to you. Evan felt it too. A pressure behind his eyes. A sense of being seen more clearly than ever before. I was part of the bargain, he said slowly. I helped design memory preservation systems. I knew how to hide fragments. You still do, Lena said. She pulled up a final file, one the group had never dared to open. Fail-safe, remembrance cascade. According to the document, the quiet protocol relied on global synchronization. As long as most human minds forgot together, the system remained stable. But if enough people remembered at once, the protocol would collapse. So why didn't we trigger it before? Someone asked. Hassan answered quietly. Because triggering it would alert the custodians immediately. And they would respond. Like now, Mara said. The custodians were not angry. They were correcting an error. Evan realized something terrifying. They didn't erase us because they wanted control, he said. They erased us because they were afraid. Afraid of what humans became when they remembered together. The ground trembled slightly. Not physically, but perceptually. The city above them continued as normal, unaware that reality itself was being adjusted in real time. They are narrowing observation, Hassan said. Preparing to isolate this zone. To erase it, Lena whispered. Evan stepped forward. No, he said. This time, we don't hide. He accessed the remembrance cascade and hesitated for only a moment. If he activated it, humanity would remember the invasion, and the custodians would be forced to choose. Evan pressed the command. Somewhere across the world, millions of people paused and began to remember. The remembrance cascade did not spread like a signal. It spread like a realization. Across the world, people stopped what they were doing and felt something click into place. It was not a sudden flood of images, but a lifting of pressure, as if a weight they had carried for years without knowing had finally been removed. Memories rushed back in fragments. A mother in Mexico dropped her phone and began to cry as she remembered holding her children underground while the sky changed color. A soldier in South Korea collapsed to his knees, hands over his ears, hearing commands that were never meant to be remembered. A farmer in Kenya stared at the horizon, finally understanding why certain fields had always felt wrong. The sky did not darken. The world did not end. Instead, humanity woke up. Hospitals filled with people overwhelmed by returning memories. Children asked questions adults could now finally answer. Old nightmares suddenly made sense. And panic followed close behind. Governments scrambled. Emergency broadcasts filled the airwaves, but this time, no one forgot them afterward. Social networks exploded with identical stories from strangers across continents. Same shapes, same silence, same watching presence. The lie collapsed in hours. The custodians responded within minutes. Satellites went blind. Power grids flickered but did not fail. Aircraft autopilot systems disengaged simultaneously, forcing human hands back onto controls. The custodians were removing crutches. If you wish to remember, their presence conveyed, not in words, but in shared understanding, then you will stand without guidance. Above major cities, reality bent. The invaders did not appear as ships or weapons. They manifested as distortions in the sky, vast, unfolding geometries that blocked stars and twisted light. People could see them now, fully, without their minds sliding away. Screams filled the streets. Not because the custodians attacked, but because humans finally saw how long they had been watched. Evan and the awake monitored the chaos from underground. The sensors were overloaded, data pouring in faster than they could process. They are forcing direct observation, Hassan said. No filters. No suppression. They want us to break, Mara replied. Evan felt the custodians' attention settle fully on him. You were warned, their presence conveyed. You were afraid, Evan answered aloud. So were we. Memories continued returning, military engagements that never happened, evacuation drills erased from history, entire weeks where humanity had lived under alien skies. Some minds couldn't handle it. People collapsed, screaming, lost in overlapping timelines of memory and forgetfulness. Suicide rates spiked. Hospitals overflowed. The cost of remembering was high. The custodians watched without emotion. This, they believed, would prove their judgment correct. But something unexpected happened. People began helping each other. Strangers held hands in the streets. Doctors worked non-stop. Artists painted what they saw, giving form to fear. Scientists shared data openly, no longer constrained by hidden oversight. Humanity did not fracture. It connected. They didn't predict this, Mara said, watching global feeds. They never understood us, Evan replied. In response, the custodians escalated. The final stage of the alien intervention arrived silently, without warning. Across the globe, the atmosphere seemed to hum with anticipation. Cities, forests, rivers, and deserts were all in transformation, and humans had finally begun to understand the full scale of what was happening. Entire populations had been removed, relocated, or retained depending on their actions. Areas that had once been dominated by pollution, war, and exploitation had been reclaimed by nature. Mountainsides regrew forests, deserts bloomed with life, rivers returned to their original courses, and species thought extinct appeared once more. For the humans who remained, life was a delicate balance. Every action mattered. Every choice, how they farmed, how they consumed resources, how they treated one another, was observed and assessed. Cooperation was no longer optional. Resistance was no longer possible. Survival depended entirely on aligning with the planet's restoration. Dr. Elena Rivera stood in the middle of a regenerated park in Madrid, watching the silver ships hover above. The sky reflected in their surfaces like molten mirrors, and she felt both awe and fear. Humanity had been humbled, brought to a level of accountability it had never known. "They aren't here to destroy us," she told a group of scientists and journalists. "They are here to save the planet. And we are just part of the equation." Around the world, humans were adapting. Communities embraced ecological restoration. Cities had new designs, half built by humans, half allowed to grow naturally. Technology was used responsibly, energy harnessed cleanly, and nature was allowed to thrive alongside humanity. Those who failed to adapt quietly disappeared, relocated to safe areas, or erased from human habitation entirely. No violence accompanied these removals. They were precise, deliberate, and final. In one remarkable example, a small village in the Amazon reappeared on satellite images transformed into a thriving forest reserve. The villagers who remained had long worked to protect the land. Others who had exploited it were gone. The planet continued to heal, with or without humans. The aliens themselves remained inscrutable. They did not communicate with words, gestures, or symbols comprehensible to humans. Their purpose was clear, but their methods were entirely alien: restoration, judgment, and preservation. Humans had no influence over them. They were observers and participants, not masters. Despite the fear, some humans found hope. People learned to live in harmony with the planet. Families who had been relocated discovered new communities thriving in restored ecosystems. Children grew up in worlds where forests and cities coexisted, rivers were clean, and wildlife returned. The Earth was alive again, and humans could finally take part in its care. But the underlying lesson remained: survival was conditional. The aliens had saved the planet, but humanity's place on it was not guaranteed. Every destructive action could result in removal. Every irresponsible decision endangered not only individuals but entire communities. Dr. Rivera reflected on what humanity had learned. Pride, arrogance, and greed had brought humans to the brink of destruction. Only through humility, cooperation, and care for the planet could humans remain. The aliens were not saviors in the traditional sense. They were guardians of a world that had no room for unchecked destruction. In the final weeks, subtle changes became evident. Humans who adapted responsibly found their surroundings flourishing. Deserts bloomed with new life. Oceans cleared. Forests reclaimed abandoned lands. And humans who resisted, who harmed the environment or ignored their responsibility, quietly disappeared, leaving no trace. The alien ships began to ascend slowly, one by one. Their purpose had been fulfilled. The planet was stable again, ecosystems restored, and humanity's place, though uncertain, had been tested. They left silently, disappearing into the stars as mysteriously as they had arrived. The world was quiet afterward, yet transformed. Humans stood on a planet that was alive, vibrant, and renewed. Cities and forests, rivers and mountains, humans and wildlife, all existed in a fragile but harmonious balance. Humanity had been humbled, but it had survived, not through power, but through responsibility. Dr. Rivera looked up at the sky one last time. The aliens were gone, but the lesson remained. The Earth would endure, but only if humans remembered their place as caretakers, not conquerors. And in the silence, the world understood the ultimate truth. The aliens had come to save Earth, from us. And now, it was humanity's turn to save itself. New councils formed. Not nations at first, but groups, scientists, teachers, archivists, survivors. Humanity reorganized around truth rather than secrecy. Evan became what he had always been meant to be: a witness. He worked with others to build the Open Archive, a living record designed not just to store information, but to resist erasure. Data was embedded in art, music, stories, and shared rituals. Memory was no longer something locked away. Children were taught what had happened, not with fear, but with honesty. We were watched, teachers said, and we chose to see. The sky became humanity's shared obsession. Telescopes were rebuilt. New instruments designed to detect not light or sound, but distortions in probability itself. Humanity no longer searched only for planets and stars. They searched for watchers. The custodians did not interfere. But they left something behind. 6 months after the Remembrance Cascade, Astronomers detected a structure in deep orbit, something that had not been there before. It was small compared to the custodian's vast forms, but unmistakably artificial. It was a marker. A message. Evan stood in the observatory as the data streamed in. "It's not a weapon," Hassan said. "It's a record." The structure contained compressed information, millions of civilizations observed across time. Worlds that accepted forgetting. Worlds that resisted. Worlds that destroyed themselves. And one final entry. Earth. The custodians had updated their archive. Humanity was now classified differently. Not as a protected species, but as an emergent equal. "They've changed their own rules," Mara said softly. "Yes," Evan replied. "Because we changed the outcome." Life on Earth remained difficult. There were no miracles, no sudden age of peace. Humanity still argued, still fought, still made mistakes. But now, when people looked at the sky, they did not feel small. They felt seen. Evan sometimes dreamed of the invasion, not as terror, but as a turning point. In his dreams, the custodians watched from a distance, no longer correcting, only observing. Waiting. One evening, Evan recorded the final entry in the open archive. "We were invaded," he said. "We forgot. We remembered. And we chose to keep remembering." He paused, then added the line that would be taught to generations to come. "The danger was never the watchers in the sky. It was the silence inside our minds." As he finished, a faint ripple passed across the stars. A signal, brief and unmistakable. Acknowledgement years past. Not quietly, not easily, but honestly. Humanity rebuilt with the understanding that it was no longer alone and never truly had been. The knowledge changed everything. Borders still existed, but they mattered less. The sky above every nation was the same, and everyone now knew who once stood behind it. Children born after the remembrance grew up differently. They did not inherit fear of the unknown. They inherited curiosity shaped by truth. They learned that forgetting was a choice humanity had made once, and would never make again. The custodians did not return. But they were not gone. Their presence lingered in subtle ways. Gravitational anomalies that corrected themselves, patterns in cosmic radiation that felt deliberate, moments when probability bent just enough to be noticed. Humanity understood the message. You are being observed, but not controlled. Evan grew older. His hair turned gray as he watched the open archive expand beyond Earth. Records were stored on the Moon, on Mars, in deep space probes designed not just to explore, but to remember. Humanity scattered its memory across the stars so it could never be edited again. One night, Evan sat alone beneath the open sky, recording what he knew would be his final message. The invasion was never about conquest, he said. It was a test of awareness. He spoke of the custodians' true purpose at last. They were not guardians of worlds. They were guardians of silence. They existed to ensure that the universe remained orderly, predictable, and quiet. Civilizations that grew too curious, too fast, were softened, made safe through ignorance. Humanity had been different. Humanity noticed being watched. That was the real threat. Evan smiled faintly as he looked at the stars. "We failed their test," he said, "and passed our own." As if in response, the sky changed. Not violently, not suddenly. A new pattern emerged among the stars, a slow, deliberate alignment visible from every point on Earth. It was unmistakable. A summons. The custodians were not returning to invade. They were inviting. The message carried no words, only meaning. You are no longer children. Humanity watched together. This time, no one forgot. Ships were not launched in fear, but in understanding. Humanity stepped outward not as a conqueror, but as a witness, carrying memory, curiosity, and choice into the dark. Evan closed his eyes for the last time knowing the truth. The invasion no one remembered had never ended. It had transformed into something else. A beginning.